Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, June 20th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 72 days, the game against Michigan in 163 days. When that Akron game rolls around, we will get a chance to see year 3 of the Jim Knowles defense. Expectations, safe to say, pretty high for that defense this year, but obviously there's a lot of returning talent. Obviously there's some new talent and guys like Caleb Downs. But what is that defense really going to look like? How aggressive are they going to be? Well, we're going to be talking about that today with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. He just wrote about that on our site. You can read that. You can be part of the very interactive conversation about that article on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse. But Tony, the genesis of this article was a question to Ryan Day. We got a chance to talk to him earlier in the week. He was asked about, how aggressive is the defense going to be, and what did he have to say?
Yeah, it's a question I've had. So I asked him, and he said they're working on that right now. And basically the example is Jim Knowles' first 2 years, very contrasting styles of aggression, and having those as maybe two baselines or two examples where you're going to fall into your aggression levels this year. And he said, that's what they're talking about right now. And you kind of have an idea of what you'd like to do, who you have that can do it. As he said, you can draw out blitzes. It doesn't mean you have guys that are effective blitzers. And so they've got to decide who those guys are, who does what best, who fits in what roles best. And then the other factor into all of this is who are you playing? Because you don't need to throw out, you don't need to go crazy against Akron. You might want to go crazy against Oregon and throw some stuff out there, but also they've got a veteran quarterback. So all of these different factors come into play about who you should attack, how you should attack, and who is good at attacking on your team.
And when you look at this year's Ohio State team, you can make the reason they're having this conversation is because you could make a case that, hey, you have so much talent, you might want to play it safe. And you can also make the argument that, hey, you have so much talent, you can be more aggressive. So I guess let's state the case for being less aggressive, because in some ways, it's not just the opponent, it's also what's the offense doing? How do they feel like the offense is doing? How do they feel, do they feel they can make up for, can they compensate for being less aggressive just because of the pure talent on that defense?
Yeah, and you look at what Iowa has done over the years. They don't do a ton of blitzing. They're just really good at playing their base defense and doing what they do. And so you have to assume when Ryan Day was watching Jim Knowles' first defense in 2022 with plenty of talent, more talent than Iowa, and they're attacking and missing tackles and out of position. And you're like, why are we doing all of this? What is it accomplishing? And it was 95% of the time, it worked every time. It was that other 5% that would lead to big plays. And so, like, if we just keep everything in front of us, and you have JT Tuimoloau going against a left tackle or right tackle, Jack Sawyer going against left tackle, right tackle, those guys are going to win some battles. The interior is going to keep those guys occupied. You have fantastic corners on the outside. And if you've got defensive ends that can get after the quarterback, and you've got defensive backs that can cover receivers, and then you have a Caleb Downs as your last line of defense, you can afford to just relax and play everything straight up, because you're going to win more battles than not. It's just a matter of, are you comfortable just giving up a little bit here and there, kind of the dink and dunk type of stuff, and eventually they're not going to pick up that 3rd and 6.
Yeah, and that is, typically a pretty reliable strategy, especially against lesser competition where, if the quarterback is not particularly consistent and you're asking him to hit 2 to 3 passes every set of downs, you're going to miss some. I mean, these are college quarterbacks, and while there is not a hashtag college quarterbacks on Twitter the way there is a hashtag college kickers, for a lot of guys, there might as well be, because that is asking a lot for guys to make consistent throws and get the ball down the field like that. And, there certainly was a case to be made in 2022 when Ohio State gave up a lot of very big plays. You take away the big plays against Michigan, you take away the big plays against Georgia, that team is probably undefeated. But the aggressiveness is part of why they were successful at times. So now let's talk about the case for being more aggressive, because you probably could, for the vast majority of the season, just sit back and just out-talent people, keep things pretty vanilla, and you're going to win at least 10 games on your schedule, probably, just based on the pure talent of your team being greater than the talent on the opposing sidelines. But then there are going to be the games where you can't. The talent is equated games that Ryan Day talks about all the time. And it feels like you can't just go double A gap blitz on every play, obviously. You have to be, smart about how you're aggressive. But you're going to have to be mixing it up and being more aggressive against some of those teams too.
Yeah, for sure. And you also have to figure when you have very talented pass rushers who are already causing issues for an offensive line, you would think a blitzer here and there is going to be more effective because the offensive line is going to be very preoccupied. Quarterback's going to be maybe looking at the rush a little bit. And so blitzing can be more effective. And then it also always depends on what you have behind the blitzer. And how, do you have, if you've got a Caleb Downs back there or, a Lathan Ransom, if Caleb Downs is blitzing, they've got guys in the secondary that can cover ground and are very good at being at coverage, at not missing tackles, at just being sound. And really, if you've got a sound back end, then you can be more aggressive in that front seven. And then you look at what they've got to work with. And Jim Knowles has said repeatedly, look at CJ Hicks, who was the number one will linebacker all spring, but also said he's better as a blitzer than anything else at this point. So they like to do that with him. And you look at a Sonny Styles playing the same position, can do some different things. Two very athletic guys. Can they play together? The different ways that you can use them. Sonny Styles is accustomed to coverage and is still probably underrated or underutilized as a pass rusher. And maybe we'll see some of that this year. But, Jordan Hancock likes to blitz from that nickel spot. We've seen Lathan Ransom do it. So they've got guys that can do it and want to do it. And they also have the guys that can be behind them and help them out. And you would think there'd be fewer coverage busts with this. Now, you're not going to eliminate all of them because you're playing some pretty decent teams too, especially when, as you said, their talent is equated. But it's just a matter of you get the quarterback off of his timing. You get the routes screwed up a little bit with the quarterback, maybe being forced to get rid of the ball quicker. And you're just trying to change the pace and trying to make the quarterback just never comfortable. And that's one of I think the downsides to just playing things straight up.
Yeah, and I think a big part of making that quarterback uncomfortable is really mixing up those looks and mixing up the coverages and mixing up the level of aggression, because if you have the luxury of having, being able to be aggressive, but you also have the luxury of being able to sort of play it a little more straight up, the Iowa style defense where you're just kind of, you do what you do and you're going to just out execute them. That's the stuff that makes you predictable, where you can do, it's a pitcher who has 4 pitches that he can throw for strikes, all 4 pitches. You don't know what's coming. You can, and if you're looking fastball and you get the change, or maybe even more problematically, if you're looking change and you get the express, well, that's pretty hard. And that makes it hard for your opposing play callers. That makes it hard for opposing quarterbacks. That's the stuff where you're going to get, you get the silly mistakes. You get the, what did you think you were going to see out there? I thought this guy, I thought this was going to come, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's coming from a different angle, or you're expecting a blitz and they drop, or vice versa. That's the stuff that creates mistakes, and that leads to turnovers.
Yeah, and it's very similar to the pitcher that can throw all 4 pitches for strikes on any count. And if you've got a defense that can effectively blitz on any down and distance, then you truly have no idea what to expect. And so that's what they're working on. That's what they'd like to have. And with the offense that they have as well, you figure they're going to score more points than last year. So then that kind of begs the same question. Does that mean they can be more aggressive on defense? Yes. Does it mean they need to be? No. So what do you want to do? Probably Ryan Day has sided on wants to be aggressive in all facets of the game, or at least that's what he says. We have not yet seen it on the special teams. We've seen it routinely in defense, and then last year they kind of backed off of it and were one of the best defenses in the nation. So the proof of concept that he's always looking for is they were really good on defense last year, and they did not do as much blitzing as Jim Knowles normally does, and not nearly as many bells and whistles as Jim Knowles nearly does. So, Tom, why fix what isn't broken?
Well, they did not in fact go unbeaten last year, so it was at least occasionally there were moments where it could have been a little less broken. So yeah, we'll see how they do this year. It's it's going to be an interesting year because there's so much talent, and the third year of Jim Knowles being at Ohio State, certainly they have installed just about everything that Jim Knowles has at this point. So he always talks about the toolbox and having the tools in the toolbox. Between the Jimmies and Joes and the X's and O's, I think this is probably the most tools that Jim Knowles has ever had in his toolbox. So we will see how he chooses to use them this fall. We'll be there for all those games, all those practices at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there to make you a smarter football fan. It's a very fun and active community on the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.